much my soul needed that. The emotion of it, the humor of it. Oh my goodness. Okay. Pray that I get through this. It's been a challenging week for me, my family, and my son. Some of you already know this. My son was in the hospital for a couple of days this week, and he's all well. He's at home recovering. It's just hard, right, when you watch somebody suffer. Y'all know what that's like. It's just hard. And I have to say, when I was at the hospital, I was completely present for him, so proud of myself. I was his advocate. I moved him through prayer meditation because that was what he asked for and needed at the time. And my faith was never shaken. I knew that he was whole, he was well. I knew he was going to walk out. I knew all of that. And yet I got home and I have just lost my center, right? Just lost my foundation. And for a lot of reasons, right? And I guess the main one is just that feeling of helplessness. You know, just that feeling of helplessness. It's that feeling of we just can't control what happens to others. We can't control this world, even if and when it hurts, right? And y'all know this. We all know this, right? Our human knows it all too well. All too well. We know it. That's the human experience. And so what I've done is, I'm not going to lie. I watched a lot of Vera on BritBox because what do you do but watch British detective mysteries when you're when you're feeling lost, right? You know, and why? Because the detective knows how to control and find justice, right? So it brings you hope in a world that sometimes feels hopelessness. So I'm not going to say that's not a good thing to do. But the other thing I did is remind myself of the practices of mystics. And that's a strong practice, and it's a long tradition, and it is in many different faith traditions, definitely the Abrahamic religions, which you know Christianity is part of. And that mystic that you guys described so beautifully in your song, that work of the mystic is the work of always knowing union, right? Always knowing oneness, always knowing that world is the world that we belong to, is the world we can choose and live in and move through, and that is our sacred belonging, and that can also be our source, right? And so I think what I've come to is, how do we practice truth in and over and with a tumultuous world? How do we practice that? And that's what I want to talk about, that. Practicing truth and witnessing a tumultuous world, right? Witnessing it and not letting it be our only world. So what I have is an affirmation. And the affirmation is, I choose truth. I choose truth over a tumultuous world. I choose to know God's omnipresence, God's essence. I choose to know my union with the infinite. So, I choose truth. How does that feel? I choose truth. I choose truth. And so, as you know, I like to leave you with practices, and I did not send my sermon notes to Jan this morning. I'm sorry. But I will. That way you will have them, and you can go back and refer to them during the week. I hope that helps. So how do I choose truth over a tumultuous world? One of the things that I do, and I've been doing, is choosing to know my primal goodness. And that's what I didn't bring my, can you bring my bag to me, please? I know this is a little odd, but you'll figure out why. There's something in there I want to show you. And it's my little bitty affirmation book, my show and tell. this is something I use, and I'll talk about it more. It reminds me on a daily basis of my primal goodness, and I'll talk about that. I'll give you the practice I'm doing so that I can connect with that every day. So that's the first one practice I want to go over. The second practice is from Richard Rohr. How many of you have read Richard Rohr or follow Richard Rohr? Right? He's extraordinary. If you don't know him, he is a priest. He has what's called a Center for Contemplative Action in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He gives classes. He's a writer. Anyway, so he has this book called Naked Now, and in it he talks about contemplative seeing. And what he says is what the mystic does is contemplative seeing, meaning that their heart, their body, their mind is wide open, just wide open, allowing for the spaciousness, allowing for whatever is. And he says the only way we can do that is when we move away from dualistic thinking, right? So I feel like that's an important message for this moment, right? For all moments. And then the other thing is to choose prayer over binary thinking. Binary thinking is so easy. Our minds do it naturally, really. It's just what our minds do. It's not, we don't have to punish ourselves for it, but we can grow differently from it, is basically it. So that's what I want to talk about, those three practices. The first one is knowing our primal goodness. The second one, choosing contemplative seeing. And the third one, choosing prayer over binary thinking. So I know my primal goodness through my daily intentions and gratitude. Now, I have this practice because it is very easy for me to sit down in the morning and write a to-do list, a very long one, and then tell myself I'm not good enough and I'm not going to get that done. That is such an I know, right? I know. Not setting myself up for success, am I? It's very easy to do that. And then it's very easy to review the to-do list in the evening and say, see, I told you weren't going to get it done, and then not get it done, right? Am I the only one, y'all? Okay, that's very easy for me. So that is not helpful, right? That's not helpful, and it does not honor my primal goodness. It doesn't honor that. That goodness of, that essence of God is within me, and I can live from that place. I can choose that. So I have this little bitty journal, and what I do is in the morning after I do my meditation practice is I write my intention for the day. Something very simple. What is my intention today? Well, you know that we were working on walk in grace, live in love, something that simple. When I was in the hospital, I am the divine presence, you know, and then it keeps me focused. It keeps me centered, meaning that I can be patient with Theo. I can give him what he needs. I can, because from that centered place, right? Everyone that comes into the room, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for all the information. Thank you for the care. And then in the evening, my gratitudes. And then what happens is that throughout the day, I can pay attention to my life and what I'm grateful for. In the evenings, my gratitude is somebody's health. You know, I remember when Vita, that was my gratitude. When I heard from her once and she's like, I'm feeling better. It's like, there was my gratitude. Vita is feeling better, right? Those are my gratitudes. Gratitude sometimes if I spent time cooking a meal with somebody or I had a long conversation with somebody, right? Just the little things in life that you know just bring you joy. Those are my gratitudes. And so that daily intention of just grounding myself in that God essence has helped me. So now I'm not, yes, I write my to-do lists, but they don't take precedence over this. Does that make sense? I'm able to be gentle with the to-do list because I'm doing it through this other place. You know, it's also like whatever I'm doing it through God's grace and giving myself that grace. So that's something that I continue to practice, and I find it supports me. The other thing I do is I stick the daily word in it because then it supports me as well. The daily word has been a long time practice of mine. So now we move to contemplative seeing. And again, this is Richard Rohr's book, Naked Now. And he says that there are 3 ways to view a sunset. he says the first one is there's a person that's a sensate type. Now, you probably know what that means. They know the world through their sensations, right? They know it through what they see, what they hear, what they can touch. So that's the first, and that's 80% of the world, he says. So for the sensate type, they would say, yes, that's the sunset, right? I can see the sunset. Then the second person is sensate type plus. This person is like the first person. They may enjoy the beauty of the sunset, but then also they're able to relate to it or talk about it or say, it says something here that they're able to use their imagination, their reason, right? So they could explain something to you about the sunset. That's the second person. The third one, he says, is the awe type. This is the mystic. This person sees a sunset, enjoys all that the first person sees and the second person, but lives in awe before an underlying mystery, coherence, and spaciousness that's connected to everything else. Does that make sense? So it just allows for all of it. Just all of it, right? And he says that's the way of the mystic. And he calls it this third eye seeing. And he says it builds upon the first two. And it's when, and I said this earlier, the heart space, the mind space, the body space is simultaneously open and non-resistant. Right? Open and non-resistant. That's big, right? That's big. Because I know that I like to resist what hurts. And it comes out in really unhealthy ways. And I'm so sorry, Thomas. When I feel helpless, I want to blame somebody. Anybody else done that? Do we see that going on in the world right now? When we feel helpless, we want to blame, right? And what this is asking us to do is have that practice of knowing that we can be in it. We don't have to resist it. It can come. It isn't going to break us. Does that make sense? It's a spaciousness of allowing it. And the idea is that when you're in that place of allowing and that complete connection with the divine, it may feel profoundly joyful and it may feel profoundly sad, and you're with it anyway. Does that make sense? You're with it anyway. You're not grasping at it. You're not pushing it away. You are there with it. And I believe that practice is also the practice that will help me not blame Thomas. That is my hope anyway, right? What he says is when you are in this deep interconnection, you are called to write, to pray, to be silent, right? So that first person he calls a thought of sight, the second one, reason, which is reflection, and the last one, that last one is true understanding. Contemplation is true understanding. Again, truth over the tumultuous world, right? Truth meaning that God never changes, law never changes, love never changes, the infinite never changes. It's always eternal. And there's that within us that is eternal. It's basically, Paul says it best when he says, do not be conformed to this world, but be renewed by the patterns of your mind, right? It's the same thing. Do not give in to the patterns of a tumultuous world, whatever that is, right? Whatever it is. Something in your family, something in the world, something at work, whatever it is, that's the tumultuous world. But practice truth. So the other practice I want to share is prayer over binary thinking. Who knows what binary thinking is? Binary thinking is all or nothing thinking, right? Binary thinking is right or wrong, black or white, whatever it is. It's either this or it's this. There's no shade of gray. There's no nuance. It's either this way, it's my way or the highway. That's another way of thinking about that. I was raised with people it was my way or the highway. And I love those people. But that is binary thinking. It's dichotomous thinking, right? Here's how it works is it categorizes people, ideas, situations into two opposing groups. That's really what binary thinking does. Now, there are ways that it's useful, right? Think about stoplights. Red, green. We know what to do. We need that. That keeps us safe. So there's a usefulness in that way of binary thinking. Binary thinking isn't useful when it's categorizing people, right? Ideas, situations. It's not helpful when it deals with complex issues like political, religious, economic interests, right? Because it makes things either right or wrong. And in doing that, it does lead to any kind of violence, right? That's what binary thinking does. So one of the things he offers is prayer. Prayer over binary thinking. Again, truth over a tumultuous world that wants to be in binary thinking. And what he says is that our master teachers, like Jesus, he was not, as you know, a dualistic thinker. Think about how when people would ask him something, did he ever say yes or no? No, he didn't, did he? He never did. He would give them this long story that usually they didn't understand, right? And they'd have questions about afterwards. We still have, because it's not yes or no. We don't live in a yes or no world, really and truly. It's not yes or no. We live in the middle, in the gray, in the nuance. So what he says is that when we move away from binary thinking and we truly move into prayer, we are becoming in unity with life, right? It's the key foundation for the kingdom of God. And we know in unity that it's not a place, right? It's not a place in heaven. It's something right here, right now. And it's in every single moment when we choose to be in that moment. What he would call the naked now. This moment exactly as it is, knowing we have exactly what we need to be in that moment. Does that make sense? Yes. So he talks about prayer, and it's what we truly believe. And I love what Reverend Vita says, is that it's like when you have a radio and you're, doing the dial. You know how you hear static? That's the binary thinking, right? That's the monkey mind. That's what the static is. But then when it tunes in and you hear it, that's the prayer, right? And the prayer it's not about talking to God or changing God, because there isn't anything that's going to change God, but it's changing us. It's changing us. It's changing our view of whatever is going on, and knowing that I'm going to hold truth in this moment. I'm going to hold truth in this tumultuous world, whatever it is that's showing up. That's what prayer is. It's about changing our minds so that things like mystery, forgiveness, love, infinity of life will resound with us. It's knowing that, right, is always there and available. Without prayer, we compare and calculate. With prayer, we know our belonging to truth over the tumultuous world. With prayer, we offer ourselves to the one beloved and know that is always our true belonging. I wrote that, y'all. Kind of like it. So speaking of mystics, which again, mystics, to be a mystic is just to know that you're in oneness, and that's your practice. So we're all mystics, right? We all are. We've all practiced that. We all know our oneness. So speaking of mystics, I want to offer a prayer that we've done before, and it's Julian of Norwich's body prayer. She's a 14th century Christian mystic, and she once wrote, "The fruit and the purpose of prayer is to be one with and like God in all things." And so after suffering immense pain, she created a body prayer that is simple and a beautiful way to pray without words. So I want us to practice that this morning. And it's got postures, 4 postures. The first one is to await. So put your hands out. This is what you do. And what you're waiting for is God's presence, however it comes to you. And then you reach up and you allow your hands to be open. And what you're doing is you're allowing God's presence to come. You're allowing God's presence to just be what it is. And then you bring your hands and you cup them over your heart and you accept. You accept God's presence right now, whatever that is. You accept that you don't know everything. You accept that you're not in charge. You accept that the one is. And then after that, you put your hands forward and you attend. And you attend to whatever it is that you're called to. You attend. Another word for this is you act upon. The main action is always to act upon God's love and to bring God's love to the world. And so I invite you to do it again, and this time we're going to do it without words, if that works. Are we ready for that? Yeah. Okay, you can watch me. Amen, and so it is.